Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock on I Heard a Rumour, and 3 o'clock is special guest time. And today my special guest is Madison Day, who has written an incredible book called Despite It All. And the book is all about her life with a mother who suffered from Munchausen's by proxy. Now, not many people know about this. I think it's probably come out into the arena over maybe more so over the last maybe 10 years or so. So, Madison, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the showroom. I appreciate it.
Oh, do you know what? It's my pleasure really having you on this show. Years and years ago, I'll just start. Years ago, probably 40 odd years ago, I read a book. I can't remember the author's name. It was an American guy, and he was a psychologist, and it was a book about Munchausen by proxy. And that was the first time I ever came across it. And then throughout the years, I've come across it various different times. So when I saw the write-up about your book, I thought, wow, to be able to get the real-life author who's lived it, who's been able to come out of it so successfully.
Yes.
I'm not, no spoilers here, but you have done an amazing job. You are a very inspirational woman, is all I can say. So let's start. You start and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am the wife to my husband Mike, who is my rock and soulmate. We have a couple of grandchildren, children living in the UK, one son living in Australia. And I have always wanted to write a book. It's just something in me that has never left from probably being my late teens. I've kind of carried this passion through life and never really had the space all the time to put pen to paper and actually write down what I wanted to get down. And what I wanted to put down on paper was the fact that I recognised from being a very small child that my childhood was very different to everybody else's. So my friends, my family, my cousins, even characters on TV, and I refer to it in the book. I'm watching Ma Ingalls look after her children on the American show
Little House on the Prairie.
That's the one, and I was always making comparisons and thinking, why have I not got a mother like Ma Ingalls? So my whole life I've wanted to do this, and Mike has given me the opportunity to take a year out of my life, come to Spain for a year, and actually achieve this goal.
So did it take a year to write the book?
I've been jotting ideas down and plotting it in my head probably for 3 decades. But it took a whole year of full-time writing to complete it. Okay,
now let's talk about the book itself, because it's a true story. It's all about your life living with the mother who had Munchausen's by proxy.
Yes.
Now, for anyone who doesn't understand what that is, can you explain that?
Yeah, so Munchausen by proxy, or what we're referring it to now in the UK as factitious illness, fabricated illness. So they're changing the terminology in the UK, which I'll talk about a bit later as well, because that, for me, makes things confusing. I still refer to it as Munchausen by proxy. It is an illness whereby a mother, generally the mother, about 95% plus cases are the female, or a female caregiver. They inflict illness on a child or vulnerable person, fundamentally to get attention. But that's only half of it, and I think that's how it's mainly defined. What my book is about as well is that my mother inflicted injury on me as well as illness. And I think often that's missing from the literature. So that's another gap that really needs filling. And one of the reasons why I thought I have to write something that shows just how complex Munchausen by proxy can be.
And it's also quite interesting because of reading the book that you still loved her all the time she was being abusive to you. You still loved her. You still wanted her around.
Yeah.
And you still had so much affection for her. Did you, when you were growing up, I know you said that, you realised your childhood wasn't like everyone else's, but did you think that how she behaved towards you was normal?
I knew it wasn't normal. I was an intelligent enough child to realise that my childhood was abnormal, and I knew that. And that, I was the one to get the sick mother, and I was very aware of that. But I think for any child who is abused by a parent, you still hold that love for them. There are parts in it where I write explicitly about how much I hated her, that I wanted her to die, because if she did die, then I would be saved. But deep down, I just wanted her to be a mother to me. And of course, that was almost impossible. Yeah. But I gave her chance after chance after chance, to come around and be a mother. And sometimes she was a mother. Yeah. So there are
times in the book where she is quite gentle and fun.
Fun, yes.
Yeah. And so what about your dad in all this as well?
So my dad really, on reflection as an adult, was another victim of our house. And my dad was basically just out at work, trying to earn enough money to pay the mortgage and to look after the family. My dad, my mum and my dad rowed a lot, and I know that he did try to get her straight, try to get her sober. And often she did. She did dry out on a number of occasions. And I think the Munchausen by proxy probably went hand in hand with her alcoholism, because I had lulls in my life where she wasn't drinking and she wasn't inflicting injury on me. So, I think my dad knew at times what was going on, but had real no control over her whatsoever.
And he probably didn't know how to deal with it.
No.
Because also you had a brother as well who sadly passed away, but she abused him as well. But you only found out about that later in life, didn't you? I
did. My whole childhood, I just thought all of the abuse is on me, and she loves him so much, and so I'm the big sister, and I'm the one that took most of the abuse. However, and I know you've read the book, so you'll have read this scene. There was a scene when I was a teenager where I revolted. So when she wanted to inflict an injury on me, she actually wanted to slice my face with a razor blade. I put my hands up and said, "No, that's it. You are never touching me again." And that day, I realised about power differentials and that you can take power if you want it.
How old were you?
I was 15.
So 15.
When I did that. Yeah. And then I bolted from the house. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I just knew she wasn't going to harm me like that anymore. And unfortunately, she then called my brother into the bathroom and she sliced his face. So that left me immense guilt because he still wasn't old enough to stand up to her. And then I guess maybe he endured more abuse after that. Yeah. But I also learned much later on, literally only a few years ago, that he also endured sexual abuse. And I never knew that.
Because I remember reading also in the book that she beat you up so badly, but then she called the police.
Yes.
And blamed it on some lads.
Yeah. Yeah, so that happened a lot. So, and that's why this case, my case, shows how complicated Munchausen by proxy can be. Often victims, their mothers are making them sick, and they don't necessarily know it's the mother that's making them sick. I knew that my mother was making me sick. I knew she was forcing different substances into me to make me poorly. I also knew that she was inflicting injury on me. And then I became part of the deception because she would call the police and then she would brief me on what I would have to say. So such a boy hit me, such a person did this, and I became a liar to protect her, and articulate a story that wasn't true. Yeah.
I mean, that must have been, growing up, we're always told never to lie.
Yes.
And then it's the person that you're supposed to trust the most, the person that you look up to in your life is actually telling you to lie.
Yeah.
I can't comprehend that. I mean, do you feel like elements of that still go on in your life? Do you have this passionate need just to be honest all the time?
Yeah, I do. I find it really difficult to lie. Because I had to do it. I was forced to do it so much as a child. It's something that I have zero tolerance on now. And if people lie to me equally, that absolutely breaks my heart now, because it's just like it's a bit of an Achilles heel for me, I suppose. But that part of the abuse, and I think you could call it abuse, me sitting and lying to the police, the doctors, my father, my family, that I found that more difficult than the actual abuse, because it really went against the grain of my nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, because of the way that you were treated and the household that you lived in, you left home at a very young age, and it seemed that you were searching for love.
Yes.
And it didn't I mean, obviously it has happened now, but even that was traumatic, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yes.
But so when you left and you had your first relationship, I think, was with the Scottish guy, was that right, Craig?
Craig, yes. Yeah.
And so did you go into that relationship thinking that the way that your parents' relationship was the way that it should go, or did you have in your mind that it should be something else and then it didn't turn out to be? Was it like you had an ideal and that's why it didn't turn out to work?
My ideal was, I wanted a Disney ending.
Yeah.
So I'd had this horrific childhood and I wanted a Disney ending. I wanted to fall in love with a man and him fall in love with me and to live happily ever after. Yeah. Unfortunately, when you have experienced complex trauma as a child, you that doesn't go away. When that trauma stops, when those incidents stop, the trauma doesn't leave you. The trauma stays in your bones.
Absolutely.
And if you've been marinated in it for decades, it's hard to get rid of. So it informs who you have relationships with. Yeah. And so you're making decisions, very important decisions like, who am I worthy of? And basically I didn't think I was worthy of much. And that's why I endured relationships that most women would have walked out on.
And you started very young as well.
And I did start very young. So I was married at 16.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And your first baby was
17.
Yeah,
yes.
17. Yeah. I mean, you look very young now.
Thank you.
I won't ask you how old you are. So now the thing that's also very important to stress here is that your mother suffered abuse as well from her.
She did, and I thought that it was really important to allow her narrative in the book, rather than just use, the story to talk about my trauma. I thought it was important to talk about her trauma, because mothers with Munchausen by proxy often have had abusive relationships, and she had a very, very traumatic childhood. And I guess it's the age-old, cycle that then she went on to create more abuse.
Because she was a very beautiful woman, so she attracted a lot of attention, didn't she?
She did, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then you left home and your dad remarried.
Yes.
And you ended up in the care system, didn't you?
I did.
And that, to me, that was horrific as well, wasn't it?
It was. So, I ended up in Howden Hall Children's Unit, which is in Edinburgh. And it's basically for the most messed up kids. And I got thrust into this world with a lot of Scottish kids who had come from really, really horrific backgrounds, and had to survive. Lots of them were aggressive, so there was abuse went on in there, and you just had to keep your head down and get from one day to the next. I ended up making some nice friendships in there, and some of the girls did pull together. But there's a scene where I'm there on Christmas Day, and I'm the only kid in the children's home, and everybody's gone somewhere bar me. And I was like, I'm not staying here. I made a decision. I was going to run away, and I was out of there by January.
Yeah, was that the place you ran away from by making sheets?
Yes, tying sheets together
and escaping out the window.
That's the one.
Yeah, incredible. But you did make a good friendship or a good relationship with your social worker, didn't you? I
did, yeah, and I'll never forget her because she was the first person, the first advocate that I'd had. She was my voice. Yeah. And she broke all the rules to bring my brother up from Manchester, and we spent a wonderful weekend in Easter House in Glasgow. That was an experience in itself, but she looked after us, and she was a really good friend. I would have liked to go back and say to her, thank you so much, because I think when you are going through abuse as a child and you feel neglected and you don't feel like you have anybody in your corner, just that one person, if I'd had one school teacher take me under their wing, or that one social worker, and they give you hope.
What happened then at school? Because when you were at school and you were living at home, the teachers must have seen the state you were in, that everything that could possibly be wrong was wrong. Do you think they deliberately ignored it?
I think back in the 80s, I think there was probably less attention and focus on whether kids were coming into school unfed or, scruffily dressed. There was less attention on child protection. And I think nowadays we're more aware and we're looking for signs. And there's communication with social services in a different way than there was back then. And you obviously didn't feel confident enough to raise your voice about it. No, I was absolutely terrified of my mother, and she didn't even need to speak. It just her eyes. She'd just they would just bore into you. And so when I was being interviewed by the police, for example, or my dad, what happened? She would just sit and stare, and I knew I couldn't tell the truth. And I knew the consequences would be really bad. So no, I was never vocal, not until my brother got his face slashed that day. And that day I said, that's it. That I said to myself, I'm telling my dad, and neither of us are going to be abused again.
And so what happened when you told your dad?
So I basically just blurted it all out, and this is what's happened for all of these years, and this is what she does, and this is, she lies. And he had a stern conversation with her, and she didn't touch us after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. You can catch your breath, and we're going to play some adverts, and then we're going to come back and continue. So we are returning with my guest, Madison Day, who, if you have been listening, has been telling us about her childhood with her mother, who had Munchausen's by proxy. And for those of you that don't know what this is where a mother, a parent, but it's usually a mother, will injure or harm their children to get attention. And we've been hearing some of the stories where Madison had been beaten up by her mother, and then her mother called the police to say that some local lads had beaten her up, and she had to accept this and lie to the police, where her younger brother had his cheek slashed by their mother. There's just so many incidents that through a childhood you wouldn't want even one of those incidences in your childhood. But there are some specifics, Madison, that you'd like to talk about too.
Yes, there are. I think one of the most prevalent for me is in one of the first chapters, where me and my brother were very small, and we'd moved into a new house in Ashington, Northumberland. And I woke up literally slumped over the shoulder of a fireman. And I woke up on his shoulder, and I could see my brother's feet slung over the back of a fireman behind me. And we were literally dropped down into this room that was completely ablaze. And all four of us really should not have walked out of that house fire, but we did. And that was one thing, but when I then found out a number of days later, and I overheard a conversation with my mum and dad, well, I set fire to the house, and she'd basically set fire to a pile of newspapers around the bottom ground floor, and went to bed and just wanted to kill us all. I realised very, very young that my mother was quite capable of killing all of us, in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I suppose living like that, like, what would she do next? Am I safe to go to sleep? Will I wake up in the morning?
How old were you then?
So I was probably about 7 then.
So as a 7-year-old, having in your mind that my mother has tried to kill me.
Yes.
And she might try and do it again.
Any time, yeah. And living in that fear, so you literally marinated in fear your whole childhood. And I suppose I wanted to bring the book out to talk about that complex trauma and how it stays with you, and yet you can still be successful. You can still do the things that you would like to do. And I always wanted to go to university, but of course I didn't have an education, but I went to college.
How old were you when you went to college?
I was probably 25, 26.
And you had 4 children by then?
I had 4 children, and I literally worked night shifts, looked after the children, went to college. I then went to university. I decided if I was going to go to university, I would graduate with the highest degree, and I graduated with a first-class honours.
Wow.
And when my friend said to me, "Gosh, you're just like a real-life Shirley Valentine," I said, "Shirley Valentine's got nothing on me."
You're more like a Lara Croft in my imagination.
I'll take that, yes.
So you were 22, you said, when you went to university. You had your 4 children at home. But your life still wasn't plain sailing, was it? Because you had your own traumas with relationship with men.
I did, because if you think that when you when you don't develop properly because you are abused, you have an inner child that often makes a lot of decisions for you. And as we know, children shouldn't be making decisions about who they should marry. But my inner child was just basically looking for anybody who would have me.
Yeah.
So whilst, my first husband helped me a lot, because I didn't have anything back then. I didn't have a family, didn't have a home. And he gave me that. I married him for the wrong reason, and I developed away from him. I was quite hungry to develop a career, and he wasn't. He was quite happy in the life that he had, and so we grew apart quite quickly. And then I got involved in another relationship that wasn't ideal, and then another one.
And you're in one now that, obviously, when that started, that was very traumatic.
Yes, it was horrifically traumatic. In that I was in a really dark place with men, and I'd just come out of a very sticky relationship with somebody, and he had just moved out of a marriage with a wife who wasn't quite ready to let him go, let's say. So that
Quite a few times.
created a lot of tension, to say the least.
Yeah.
But I suppose, and we're laughing about it, aren't we? And that, and that's the essence of the book as well. The book is not just a misery memoir.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a lot of misery in there.
Because, moving on to the fact that you went to university, you became a lecturer.
Yes.
So you have moved from having no education, from being abused and a traumatic life, to, this is what I mean, out of adversity, you have built a success.
Yes.
Because are you still lecturing?
I do some part-time lecturing.
And what do you lecture on?
Childhood trauma.
Wow, yeah. Who would know that better?
Yeah.
And so this is your first book.
Yes.
Despite It All is your first book, and that is all about your life. And I would highly recommend anyone who, even if you're not interested or you haven't suffered, I had a wonderful childhood, but for me, reading that book and the way you write is just, it is like reading a piece of fiction, but then you're learning so much about the human mind and the human condition as well.
Absolutely.
So what's next after this book?
So I'm partway through a second book.
Oh, okay.
And the second book, because I did have to skim so much on the first book, I want to go over some of those details in more detail. And the second book also is primarily about the relationship with my husband. So it's about mine and Mike's life in more detail, because I skimmed that too. So it's a real just follow on from the first book. But I'm also mindful that I'm really keen to try and turn this into a screenplay.
Wow.
So I know that I need to be writing further episodes, if you like.
Incredible.
But,
so who would play you in your ideal, in your mind? Who would play you?
Oh, who might play me? Yeah, I like Sarah Lancashire. I would definitely have her play me. Yes.
She's a bit older though, so it'd have to go into stages.
It would, yes.
No, she is. She's a fantastic actress.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she'd relish that role and make it amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to talk too much. I don't want to talk in detail about, where your mother is now, where your father is now, because I don't want to give any spoilers away.
Okay.
So what we want to do is we want to encourage people to go out there and buy the book. Tell people how they can buy the book.
Okay, so it's available on Amazon globally, and it's been out now for 2.5 weeks. And we've got sales in America, Germany, Canada, Australia, the Czech Republic, Spain, UK, as well as some others. And so any Amazon site you can go on and just pop in Despite It All, or my name, Madison Alexander Day.
Fantastic. Now, it also reached number 1 in the charts, in the book charts for books on Munchausen by proxy.
It did in the UK, yes.
Yeah.
So within its first week, it became the number 1 best-selling book on Munchausen by proxy, which I'm incredibly proud of.
Oh, you should be,
Yeah.
absolutely. So when you go back to the UK, will you be doing any book tours and book signings?
Yeah, we've got a program of just getting to different places and meeting people and doing book launches across the country. I have a very good friend, Dr. Mark Feldman, and he is a specialist in Munchausen by proxy. He's the professor of psychiatry and psychology at Alabama University. And he's really took me under my wing. He read the book and his name's on the front. He's endorsed it as the best memoir he has ever read. So I'm super proud to call him my friend. And at some point I would love to go over to Alabama and get to meet him and maybe do a public talk on it over there. So I'm looking at traveling internationally to get this book out there to raise awareness.
100%. Wonderful. Have we covered everything? I'm conscious that there's so much to talk about still. Is there anything that you really feel that you want to talk about now?
I think finally, just to say, and it's still very perplexing for me to realise that safeguarding training in the UK, and I'm sure in many countries, is missing Munchausen by proxy, and it's something that's seen as rare, so therefore not necessary. But there are lots of academics that say it's rare because it's not being diagnosed.
Yeah.
And the more we train staff, the more we realise that there actually will be far more cases than we're willing to admit.
Absolutely. And if teachers are made aware of it as well.
Absolutely,
in school,
yeah.
Maybe they could add it to whatever, when you go to teacher training college.
Should be integral to that. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it is children. It's children that suffer this.
Yeah, and while us as professionals are not aware of it, those children stay at risk.
Absolutely. And then who knows what happens in their later life, where you talk about self-fulfilling prophecies.
Absolutely.
And it's just incredible that you broke right away from that. You have a very healthy, good relationship with your children.
Yeah.
And you've got grandchildren as well.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, Madison, what can I say? Thank you so much for coming into the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Oh no, it's been incredible, and I loved reading the book. As I keep saying to people, I have to keep pinching myself that this isn't a work of fiction. This is real. This is someone's life. In the way that you've written it, is there was no. You weren't sort of boo-hoo me.
No.
It was very sort of matter of fact. This is what happened. This is what she did. This is what I did.
This is how I coped.
This is how I coped.
Yeah.
And then even when you had relationships and it was like you went through some trauma with your relationships and it was like, okay, just got to
move on.
Just got to move on. Just do it.
Yeah.
And incredible. So thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Ruma.
I'm going to play a song that you've chosen, and it's Heroes. By David Bowie, and this is for your brother.
It is for my brother. So it's a song that he used to sing beautifully, and he believed that everybody could be somebody's hero every single day.
I think you two were each other's heroes.
We were, definitely.
Yeah.